Hey guys, it's WolfMaiden, and today's video is going to be about a small LARP concept that I'm calling the Band of Travelers. If you saw my other video on a different small LARP concept that was about artists and artisans picnic, this concept can similarly be played with a small number of people and sort of brought into your continuous LARP game that you're having with your friends. So if you're trying to look for other activities, this is one idea. It does require hiking, so it is physically intensive. So now onto the idea itself. So to sum up the concept, the Band of Travelers LARP is a LARP where the main activity is a hike, and players will assume the role of one of many different things, which dictates what their job or their activity during the hike is going to be. This idea is about storytelling on the trail and immersing the player in stories on their travels. It can be how you introduce characters to one another, be it about prominent nobles or player characters, or it can be about stories of different regions they are traveling to or from, like stories of war, illustrating for them commoners fleeing war or soldiers on their way to it. If you plan to play this game more than once, you do not need to have your players get locked into a role that they cannot change, assuming everybody's adventurers or you don't have classes that are immalleable. Then players can play the role of a merchant one time and then a hired guard the next. I highly recommend that you go and watch the Artists and Artisans Picnic. There's a lot of integral components of small LARPs in that video to build off of for this concept. So go take a look at that. I have timestamps in the description for things like making characters, gameplay elements, that kind of thing. I have examples as well, and it's a quick watch. It's not very long. The whole video is 11 minutes. So the goal for this small LARP concept is mostly narrative driven. I think it's a simple idea as an activity to use to springboard into a game. And I really like its flexibility. You can use this at different times for different things, to introduce new characters as players travel, that kind of thing. And the Game Master or GM should prepare a bit of story for the trail. Players may also have activities that they do on the trail. For example, bards will entertain, and scholars may make sketches or write their observations about flora and fauna they see, or merchants must finish the hike in order to sell their goods in another town. And the main concept is the players of this game will be fulfilling a role. That could just be what they are attempting to do this time around, especially if they're adventurers who just do what they feel like at any time. So the different roles that I've written down for this LARP concept are the merchant, hired guard, bard, courier, soldier, and scholar. These are just some ideas. They're not the only thing that you can have on this road, especially the GM who might be playing as a prominent person like a king or something like that. But these are some ideas of player roles. So these are an example. You can absolutely use them. If you want to expand on more things you can do on the trail in a certain role, that's absolutely up to you. So we'll start with the merchant. The merchant will be looking to sell their goods. If you played the Artisans and Artists Picnic, and you kept track of how many things you made, you can then quantify it somehow. Let's say you spent an hour crafting and that equals 10 goods. Let's say you were baking, so you made food to deliver to the next town. Or let's say you were sewing or you were crocheting. You're taking clothing to the next town, that kind of thing. Let's say the physical activity of going on a hike is too much. The merchant can also have been contracted to sell the artist's goods on the trail here. So it kind of works with the whole theme, and players who are less inclined to go hiking can still benefit from these going on. So the merchant is going to be bringing their goods. It can be like an extra bag that just kind of resembles sort of a pack that you carry, something like that. You don't need to weigh yourself down so much, but a little bit of weight would make it a little bit realistic. Maybe just pack extra stuff for the group. So the merchant would be like the pack mule of the group. Next is the hired guard. The hired guard is going to be there for protection. I really only recommend this role if there is a second group, which I'll get to later, but they're there for protection. They might clash with other groups on the trail. This could also just be sort of a passive helping role. A hired guard can also carry the merchandise, that kind of thing. So they double as both. It's just an additional role there. It's less necessary if you have no other group and it's one group doing this. So the next role that I want to talk about is the bard. So the bard would just be there for entertainment. Maybe they bring a notepad, they're writing poetry, or bringing an instrument on the hike, and they play for the group when they are resting. So that's kind of the idea. Or even just on the trail, they might sing here and there or whistle or whatever talent that they have. The courier, while editing, I realized I didn't really explain the courier well. The courier would be similar to the merchant insofar as they would be delivering something to another town, but this is not something that they have to make or buy. It's just a job that they have, so they may make less money than the merchant, for example, but they'll be delivering notes and things like that, and can even be useful if a letter is supposed to be opened by the group or anybody in the group is receiving mail. The courier could be responsible for delivering these things and retrieving these things from the next town, meaning players, because of the courier, will be able to send and receive mail to other places in the game world and receive responses. So an interesting, important role, but also a way for a player to earn money if they are just taking a job where they're delivering a package or a piece of mail or a lot of mail. Then we have the soldier. Having a soldier and a hired guard could be helpful together because they can spar and things like that, but the soldier role is only if an adventurer in your game is enlisted in your game's army in whatever place and they're headed back home, or they are headed to the place that they're supposed to go. The idea for Band of Travelers was that each individual player can have their own motivations for being on the trail, but come together to travel on this road to their destination. You could have 5 merchants or 5 soldiers. You could have a combination of any of them. You don't need a merchant, you don't need a soldier, you don't need a hired guard. You could just be bards and couriers, merchants and soldiers. You know, it could be a broad variety of these things. Additionally, you could also have a scholar if you have somebody who wants to sketch the ecology around them during the breaks. You could have important individuals traveling on the road. So then more hired guards would make sense. So those are some of the roles there that I have come up with, but you can absolutely come up with more. You can even have artists on the trail doing their work on the trail. Everybody travels. And so that's kind of the idea. You can use this time for roleplay development of characters, for meeting new characters introduced into the game on a long travel. I think it can be a fun plug-in to a continuous LARP game that's sort of like D&D sessions, basically. So next we're going to go ahead and talk about gameplay elements. And first, of course, we've already talked a little bit about story, but interactive story is important. And players can make choices from story cards, or maybe you have players decide which way to go within the story that takes them to different parts of your game world and have different effects on the players story-wise. You can also have puzzles, riddles, and random events. So you don't always have to go off of this scripted story that you have, or you just feel like it's been a long time since something has actually happened during your hike. So aside from story, a lot can happen on the trail. Maybe players see a traveling con man who offers them a riddle to solve, and if they solve it, they win a prize. And the con man is thinking himself too smart for them to figure out his riddle. Or perhaps there's an opportunity for gaining resources used in other parts of the game, like finding a patch of rare herbs, discovering treasure, or even a mystery involving a murder. And then you can create skills for players to invest in. The Artists and Artisans Picnic covers this a bit, but additional skills can be created specifically for this portion of your continuous LARP game, or if you're only planning on using the Band of Travelers LARP concept. Rewards for the actual event itself, like giving currency, skill points, and resources that can be spent or used in your game world to keep players wanting to play. And then you want to have downtime because this LARP concept revolves around hiking. It's important to bring the group together outside of the hike or when you guys have downtime, maybe around a table, something like that, to allow your players to spend their rewards and skill points to improve their characters for next time. This should be done before the next hike or next event, just so you finalize everything and everybody has their updated characters. So next we're going to talk about some example skills. So you can have role-specific skills or general skills that any type of role can use, but we'll start with the role-specific skills first. So there's bargaining. Merchants have a percentage increase in profit when they sell their goods in another town. Intimidating, where hired guards or soldiers have a chance of intimidating NPCs like potential NPC thieves, conmen, or highwaymen. Of course, if your players are a little morally gray or evil, they can of course use this for evil means too, if you allow that. And maybe they can prevent NPCs from being victims if they happen to pass by a scene where other NPCs are getting taken advantage of or robbed. Then the next skill is always heard, and this is for bards. When they're performing on the trail, they have a chance to get tipped by non-player characters passing by the group. Then there's meticulous mailer, making sure to use all the space available in your bag. You're able to hold more mail, and as a result, earn a percentage more money each time you deliver. And published scholar, your sketches and notes on ecology are worth more now that you're a published scholar. And then the general skills, you could use something like second chances. Once per person guessing that has this skill, players get a chance to try a different option if they fail at a riddle or solving a puzzle. Then there's pickpocket. So pickpocket could be a way for players to have additional choices during story or random event cards to attempt to maybe pickpocket an NPC involved for items maybe they weren't able to get another way. Like if they failed a riddle or something like that, they can maybe still steal from the NPC what they would have won. And then there is scavenger, which is at the end of each travel, you always find a random resource. And those are just a few suggestions. You can absolutely use all of these, some of these, or none of these and come up with your own. But I figured it'd be a good idea to show you what they might look like for this game. So now we're going to talk about rewarding players next. So you're going to want to set up rewards for each player's role, if applicable, because some characters may just be traveling for personal reasons and choose not to take a role at all. Merchants will earn money based on trade prices of the goods they are selling at the place they're traveling to. Hired guards are paid out of their employer's pockets, which can be from the GM's character as well, in case it's like a king who has a bunch of guards and happens to hire a player character. And bards may be paid out of travelers' pockets, or let's say they have a planned concert or a contract to fulfill at a tavern they are traveling to, in which case they get paid after the hike. And then the couriers are paid for each piece of mail they are delivering, which could be from other players or non-player characters, or one flat rate for delivering their mail from one place to the next. Soldiers could be paid for meeting at their station place, especially if they are trying to enlist in the military at the place they're going to. Scholars may get compensated for each plant or animal they sketch or write about. And in addition to currency, players can get experience or skill points, if your game system has that, for each session to go toward a set of skills that the game master would come up with.
Now you can also have two separate sets of players. I do not recommend hiking alone, by the way. I am just saying if you have, let's say 10 people, you have 5 people on one hike and 5 people on the other. And what you can do is the first 5 people can go out on the hike an hour earlier, something like that. So then the second group of hikers heads out on their hike after that hour is up, and they meet at some point. This can include extra drama, especially if each set of players is coming from different places. So they kind of meet up in the middle there, even if their other hiker group is on their way back. So this concept probably takes a little bit more preparation than the other one, the picnic one, for example. But I think it can be well worth it, especially if you utilize good story beats as the hike progresses. I think that it can be really entertaining.
So now that we've covered the concept itself and the roles, we're going to talk about preparation. The game master needs to prepare story cards with plot written on them, or random events written with choices. The setting players are playing in. If you've already made one, you can just slot it in. A time and place for the event. Their game master character. For this concept, I think it works best when the game master takes the role of a character, because then they will be able to deliver the story both as an integral character or a character of interest themselves, speaking to the characters and things like that, and as the GM who steps back and tells players what's going on. And the GM will also need hiking gear, food, water, and other things necessary for the hike itself that other players aren't bringing or sharing. The players will need to prepare their characters. This includes names, backstories, skills, and anything else that is relevant for your game. any supplies for their role. So scholars will need paper to write or sketch on, hiking gear, food, water, and anything else that they are tasked with. So next we're going to go through example story and how to deliver your story, and also other storytelling advice for this particular LARP concept. So first we're going to talk about how to tell a story in this LARP concept, and the very first introduction of story should be at the beginning of the hike, where the game master lays the scene out, explaining what they see around them, what the road looks like, who's passing by, maybe addressing certain character things, maybe even the weather if it's different than the actual day's weather, that kind of thing, and let the player characters speak to each other so that they can get to know one another on this hike since they are all going in the same direction. So after that initial beginning story, the game master's character, if they are going as one, this is optional. Technically, the game master can just deliver story without being an actual character. But in case you do want to use a game master character, the game master character will interact with players, talking, delivering story, portraying this character's, nervous habits or different things about them for players to better get to know this character outside of being told who this character is. And this can be useful if you're playing a prominent figure like a noble or a king, maybe who's undercover, or, a fellow merchant or a guard who was hired on and maybe has other motives, that kind of thing. Then next are story cards that are read by the game master at various points during the hike. These will mention what the players can see and sense around them, which may include choices players can make to determine the next story card read. I would keep it simple with 2 possible choices if you're going to use choices. Otherwise, it's absolutely fine to just illustrate what's going on and give players choices that don't change the next story card that will be read. And lastly is the closing story read by the game master. This lays out the final scene that players witness while on the trail. It can be dramatic, or it can just be letting the players know they reached their destination, and then from there they can decide what to do, which would mean you guys need to figure out what your next session's going to look like. Or it can be a dramatic story, like the example that I'm about to give. So let's say you as the game master wants to be a soldier because you want to tell a story about a war. I'm going to use my LARP lore and just go with a former knight from Caspar is headed on the trail. The players don't yet know that this soldier is a knight, wears plain clothes. Maybe he's a merchant, he carries a pack on his back, something like that. Kind of disguises as something else, which is absolutely possible as the game master to do. So this soldier from Caspar, he has left his home. In Caspar, there is a civil war brewing, so this makes a lot of sense. He's leaving that behind. He's actually on the run. He kind of abandoned his post because he didn't agree with what was going on. So he's headed to Ostvindia, and he starts meeting everybody on the trail. Everybody's like introducing themselves, as they begin to all travel in the same direction. So as time progresses, maybe the soldier's looking back a lot more. He just keeps peeking behind his shoulder. He's a little anxious seeming at camp, and slowly kind of reveals some things like, I expected somebody to be following. I've been waiting for them eagerly, just playing into that kind of thing. And so this Casparian soldier continues down the trail, and maybe, at the end when, let's say, you have merchants there or whatever, you get to your destination, and the soldier, you bring out that envelope, the special things, you then announce that this is happening in character for everybody, and then you read off your story beat there. The game master would read, you hear a rustle in the undergrowth around you. There's no wind and nothing that would naturally disturb the undergrowth. Everything is still. Suddenly, it becomes very apparent that there is no bird song. It's quiet. Too quiet. Then, off in the distance, you hear a sound like thunder. But there are no clouds in the sky, and you realize that's the sound of hooves. The man that you've been traveling with looks extremely alarmed. His brows furrowed. He looks to the brush that had previously moved, and he begins running in the opposite direction.
out from the brush, a bowman comes, and before anybody can react, he shoots at the soldier. The arrow pierces his back. His movement ceases as he drops to the ground, presumably dead. The hoofbeats continue louder, that sound of thunder continuing. What do you wish to do? And sort of do something like that. It can be dramatic. It can be pleasant. It could be unfortunate. It can be demonstrating the conditions on the road or politics, especially if they see a king go by or they have an interaction with a prominent figure on their trail ride. But you absolutely can deliver a fantastic story while out on the trail. Remember to experiment with your creative ideas there, but I think it's an effective way to tell a story while on a hike. And it doesn't have to take all day, or it can be a couple-day hike. It really depends on how experienced of a hiker you are and how comfortable you are with hiking, and your supplies and the time that you have and who you have with you there. You could even, if you have a lot of friends, bring your two groups together and have two separate GMs who are, work together to tell a story on both sides. And so there's a lot of possibility there, and I think this is a pretty good idea. So, you don't have to have a whole extensive storyline all written out right away, but it's a really good filler or lead up to maybe another sort of story thing. Maybe you're renting out a cabin where you guys can get more immersed, but it's sort of like a lead up to something. You definitely can do a lot of story, I think, out on the trail, and it would just come in the way of sort of like D&D sessions would be for a game master to inform the players of what's going on around them. So the game master is going to have to work with the players on what their motivations are for their role or the activity that they're doing out on the trail. If you have somebody who wants to sketch or something, maybe they're getting commissioned, everybody's sort of getting similar amounts of money for different types of work. It really all depends on what's going on. Maybe a player is looking to visit somebody and wants more of a personal role play story kind of thing. With these small LARP concepts, you can really play into that and really help your player characters get to know their character or get into their character this way. Maybe you separate two players who have history together in game, and so when they meet up, it's an emotional reunion or it's animosity, so they have a fight. That kind of thing can absolutely happen. So communicate with your players about what they want out of the roleplay experience and try to tell a good story. And yeah, it's kind of a free activity you guys can do, and it's fun. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Take care.